Hello, hello, and welcome, my friends, to the next video in the Create Better Content series where I show you how to tap into your creativity so that you never run out of content ideas again. I'm Penny, and I'm your guide. I'm going to guide you through this creative content process where I'll be teaching you how to create more engaging content. You know, that stuff that you're going to post that's going to help you reach more qualified customers online. And if you want to learn more about creativity and how this can help you with your content marketing plans, I'd love to see you hit that button and subscribe to this channel. So this month of May, is what I always refer to as my celebration month, because not only is it my birthday this month, but it's actually my work anniversary this month. I'm going to be celebrating 24 years in business as a marketing consultant. That's right, 24 years. Wow, huh? So this month, we're going to be digging into some really, really great, amazing, and remarkable content. And what I would like to focus on this month is something called storytelling. I'm going to share with you some stories of my own origin story, and I'm going to walk you through this process to show you how you can start adding some storytelling elements into your content. And I will use my stories as an example. So for this next set of videos, this next series of videos that I'm going to be doing the month of May, I'll be sharing a lot of my background stories, the things that I've learned over the years about content marketing, and how all this can translate to help you create your own remarkable content. So let's get started and jump right into today's video. The poet and author Maya Angelou once said, "I've learned that people will forget what you've said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." So think about that for a minute. Let that sink into your head. Let that sink into your head just a full minute or even just 5 seconds. Don't think about what you have to do later or that email that you forgot to return. Just be still. And just for a minute, think about those words that I just said. That people will never forget how you made them feel. So when I think about that quote, and I think about how it relates to how we're marketing our businesses, especially marketing on social media, it makes me think about this. You know, sometimes people will forget about what you've posted, and they could be forgetting about the event that you tweeted about, but they'll never forget the person who made them feel important because you heard what they had to say. They will remember the ones that they know really listen to them. Okay, so I want you to put a pin in that, and I'm going to start telling you some stories here. And we're going to go back to this, and I'm going to pull this all together, and I'm going to show you how all of these things are connected with the storytelling elements that we're going to be going through in today's video. All right, so settle in. Get yourself your favorite beverage. Get yourself in a comfy chair and listen to the story that I'm going to share with you about my first job. I feel like it was a good place to start since I'm going to be celebrating my work anniversary this month. So why don't I start telling you how I started in business, the first real job that I had. I mean, the first real job that I had way before I started my business 24 years ago. My very first job was I worked in radio. And I mean like radio, long time ago. We were still spinning records back then. That's how long ago it was that I was in radio. And I can honestly tell you from an early age that I had this kind of strange obsession with radio. And I know that all of us kids who were growing up in the 70s, we had this thing where we would walk around with our little tape recorders and we would record songs on the radio, you know, and play them back and listen to them. And it was kind of fun like that. But I didn't just record the songs on the radio. I actually pretended that I was like a morning DJ, and I would do this little intro. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's the latest song from Hall & Oates. You know, I mean, like that kind of thing. I would do that. And it was kind of strange, and my parents would just kind of look at me and kind of shake their heads, and they said, well, I guess she's staying out of trouble. Just let her do it. Let her do what she wants. So I've always in my head had this thing about radio, right? So when I went to college, I went to the University of Georgia, and I was going through the marketing degree program. At a certain part of the marketing program that we go through, we're required to take a type of internship. They want us to get our, hands dirty and to learn a little bit more about the work that we're going to be doing. So I was actually fortunate enough to work at a local radio station. And I don't mean just like any radio station. This was the radio station. In Athens, Georgia, this was the radio station that all of the college kids listened to. This was the station that was like number one constantly, had all the greatest music on it, had all kinds of amazing events. This was the radio station. So it was like a really big deal that my very, very first job is at this radio station. So when I went to them and I said, I'm a marketing student, I'm here at the University of Georgia, this is what I'm into and all this, all this stuff. And I said, I'm looking for an internship, right? And they said to me, we're not really set up for an internship, but we would like the idea of how much you're into radio and how you're a marketing student and all that. We'd like to hire you. So I was like, all right. So here I was, a junior in college, and getting my first real job. They actually paid me like money every single week to go out and sell. And it was interesting because, I was still taking my classes. I was still doing all my extracurricular stuff, going to parties, going to football games, doing stuff with my friends. And I would schedule my work stuff around my classes and everything else that I did as a college kid. I mean, it did pretty good because at that time, I was selling to these people who were looking at me like, okay, she's a college student. She really understands our demo. She knows what it's like to be a college student because she's currently a college student. So, I started out with this local radio station, and it was pretty good in that sense. I was starting to learn how this works and how to learn how to sell and how to learn how to work around my schedule and what it was like to have a real job that you had to go to every single day and you couldn't call in sick because, you didn't do your homework that day or whatever was going on. So I had to learn as I was going to school. But it was great. It was great fun. It was great education. And it was my first real radio job. I ended up going to other radio stations throughout the years. I think I went to a total of 5 different radio stations in about a 15-year time period. So I continued on working through radio sales. And then from radio sales, I started shifting into other areas of the radio station. At my very last radio station that I worked at was actually here in the Orlando area. If you're not familiar with where I'm located, I'm in the Central Florida, Orlando area, and I actually worked at one of the really, really big Orlando country radio stations. And when I got that job at the radio station, I had stopped working in sales and moved my desk into the promotions department. And, it had been going, the selling. Let me just talk about this selling stuff. I had been in sales for so long and for so many years, the sales was just a bit of it was a struggle. It was a struggle for me. It really, really was, especially the last 2 radio stations that I worked at before I actually went to the one where I was in the promotions department. And it was tricky, because I knew that I could make more money in selling. I knew that was the place to be in the radio station to really grow my income, to do more and be more and all those wonderful things that we like to think about when we're in our 20s. But the real reason that I stopped selling, the real reason that I stopped selling and moved in promotion is this. I am so freaking absolutely terrible at a hard sell. Quotas were getting really, really hard for me to reach. Management was always on me to close more deals, and I tried. I really did try. I really did. But for me, my efforts just got to this kind of uncomfortable, awkward, kind of icky place. And the truth was, I sucked. I sucked at selling the product. I sucked at the hard sell. I sucked at that moment of trying to close more deals. I sometimes would just get up and walk out. I openly admit that I'm sure my sales managers would have hated for me to say that. I just didn't do a good job of it. And what's really, really interesting about this, and I would say a little bit ironic, and those last years of sales that I did, actually, I did make money. I did hit my commission numbers because people bought from me. And they bought from me not because I was so pushy and I was really good at that hard sell and really good at that close, but they bought from me because my customer service skills. They bought from me because I showed them how to get more folks through their door, more people to show up at their events, more orders for all the cool stuff that they were selling. At the time I was doing this, I was just trying to figure out a way to help them because, they were my clients. I didn't realize what I was doing was something called selling a solution. I didn't know that that's what I was doing because I would just give them reasons about why they should run their ads on my radio station. My listeners were loyal to station advertisers. My listeners were the right customers for these businesses. These people had money and the right problems and all the things that they wanted to buy. And they just, it was such a good fit. So you would think, knowing all this information that I had, that I would have been the top salesperson and that I would have driven some big, huge, fancy car with all this solution selling that I was doing. But I wasn't. I really wasn't that good of a salesperson. And to be honest with me, my cute little red geo tracker that I had at the time was enough to get me to work and back. And that was pretty much it. Because during the time that I was in sales, it was a different time back then. It was way before we had social media. It was way before anybody even talked about this thing called solution selling. Because at that time, businesses just wanted lower rates. They wanted to know that they were getting a good deal. And if they weren't going to get a good deal, they were going to buy from the next radio rep that was sitting for his turn, that was sitting outside the office of the manager waiting for his turn, right? It was totally different back then. Those days before social media and the idea of one-to-one engagement had happened. So much has changed. And as much as I really enjoyed the work I was doing, I did a much better job in the promotions department because I understood about customer service. And I understood how all of this translated to help, the company itself with my solution selling. I understood that there was a better way to do things. I sometimes wonder to myself, maybe I was just a little bit ahead of my time. Maybe that's what it was. Because I went from the promotions department into the interactive department. And that's eventually is what led me to the business that I'm in right now. But that's a story for another day. So you get all that. So I just shared a story with you about what I learned about myself and what I learned about solution selling and the customer service versus a hard sell, being a top salesperson and driving a geo tracker. I mean, it's a good storytelling content if you really think about it. But let's look at it. Let's look at this and break it down about what I was just talking about. I want to pull in these storytelling elements that I was sharing with you at the beginning of this, and how you can take one of your stories, one of the things, something that's happened with you in your past, and you can turn this into some really great storytelling content for some of your marketing posts. So if we look at any story, we look at the basics of a story, the story at its core. We know that a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the beginning and the middle and the end, they're kind of like the story's building blocks, right? They're like the transition. So this happened, and then this happened, and then this created this happened, so that then this happened, and then this moved on, and this moved on. And then together, they create the whole story structure, right? So we need to think about it in respects of how we're telling the story. We're not just going to put some story in there and then say, hey, look, I just added my story in there. I've got storytelling content. No. Doesn't work like that. What we want to make sure that we're doing, if we're going to be bringing in a story, we want to make sure that we've got a beginning, a middle, and an end. So how do we think about all of these pieces and parts, and how are they all going to come together, right? We want to think about, what's the purpose of this content? How are we going to get somebody to click on the link? What's the purpose to get them to download the email, to sign in, to sign up for your program? You want to start with that. Think about what its purpose is and how that's going to help you create the beginning, the middle, and the end. So let's uncover what's going on here about these elements of these stories. So if we think about it from this perspective, the beginning of the story is basically like the promise of what's to come, right? So when I started talking to you about the beginning, I started with a quote about listening, and about how I set up the lesson by telling you about that quote and listening, about how people made you feel, and told you about my love of radio and why this was my first job. So when I got to the middle of the story, where all the action happens, this is the part with the trials and the error, and we always think about, the hero of the story and how they go through all of these things and then they come out to be a better person in the end, but they have to go through all of these things. That's the middle of the story, right? This is what happens in the middle. And that's when I shared with you that I was struggling with sales and when I stopped selling and how I moved to the marketing department. That was the middle of the story. And I was explaining to you about why this was so important and what was going on with me. And I keep bringing it back throughout the story, explaining about how I had customer service skills and how I really knew and how I really listened. Like I talked about in that first quote at the beginning of the story, how I listened to it, that my clients did, X, Y, and Z, and they would match up to those listening to the radio station. And they were all, going through all of this, and I was able to get even the business owners to listen to me about why my radio listeners were a good fit for them and why they wanted to buy ads with me. It was all about the fact that I was there in that place of understanding not just how to close a deal, but how to sell with my customer service and for listening. So that was the whole middle about that. That was what was going on with that situation. And when we talk about the end of the story is the conclusion, the outcome. How did you get to that place? What was the results of it? What was the lessons that you learned? How did you live happily ever after, so to speak, in story language? So we're going back to the beginning, and I go back to that quote that I shared with you and about how people want to listen, and they remember those that made you feel something. They remember those that listened. And I bring that up because that's what I went through. That was the middle of the story. I learned about something called solution selling. And it wasn't so much about my rates, and it wasn't so much about whether I was a top salesperson driving a big fancy car. It was the fact that I listened. And it was the fact of the way that I made people feel about themselves. It was the fact that my customer service was the reason about why I did continue to make money, but that was also the reason why I didn't make a whole lot of money. So we want to think about it from both perspectives. So when it comes down to adding storytelling into our content, you want to make sure that you're looking at it as a real story, that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that these are the most important pieces. So when we're thinking about how we're going to be promoting and trying to do some kind of soft sell within our social media messages, it's really important to put all of these three things together: the beginning, the middle, and the end. We want to talk about their challenges. We want them to pay attention. We want it to go full circle, so we want to bring in at the ending what we talked about at the beginning, right? So when it comes down to basically, I guess the lesson that I had learned with regards to my ending, I could say that it always goes back to that quote. And that the ones that listen to them, the ones that help them feel heard. So when you understand your services and your products, and fill in the blank, your programs or whatever it is, you're able to help untangle their obstacles. You can show them that your selling is the solution to their problems. Because when it comes right down to it, especially when it comes right down to our content marketing and how we're marketing our businesses online, people really don't want to buy products or services. What they want to know is that your products or services, how your program can provide them with some specific result, like something that's going to make their life easier. It's going to help them do something faster or give them more confidence. This is what we're doing with our storytelling. We're not just sharing a story about something amazing that's happened to us or even something bad that's happened to us and the lessons that we've learned. We want to pull it all together to show them that we know that they're here, that we are listening. And we're not just listening to what they have to say about their challenges, we're listening to what's going on with them, with their pain points. You know, it has everything to do with the fact that people will forget what you've posted, that they'll forget what event you tweeted about, but they'll never forget that person who made them feel important because you heard what they had to say. And they'll always remember the ones who really, really listened to them. So thank you so much for joining me today with this creative process. If you've enjoyed this content about creativity and about storytelling today, I hope you'll consider subscribing to this channel. And if you're ready to dig in and do the deep work of developing your content marketing strategy, the link is below so you can subscribe to the Create Your Business program. Every month you're going to get content, just like some of the stuff that I talked about today. You're going to work through this content in your monthly interactive workbook, which will show up in your inbox. And then you'll get some creative tools that will come to your front door to help you learn how to tap into the right side of your brain and to develop your content marketing plans in a new way to ensure that you'll never run out of content ideas again. You are magnificent, my friend, and let me be the first to say, I'm proud of you. Until next time.